Hello guys, so this is my process portfolio walkthrough. I remember when I did the IB, which was in the year 2018, so not so long ago. And I was also searching on YouTube for someone that would actually walk me through their process portfolio, because those that I saw online, I had no idea how to judge them, whether they were good or not, and just by plainly looking at a document, I think the process behind it quite unpersonal. So I thought I would just walk you through the process portfolio, as you probably already got introduced to it by your teacher, is an externally examined assessment task worth 40%. So it's quite important. And I would also recommend you to print out the marking criteria, and I would actually advise you to use the extended marking criteria that has also some tips on it. If you want, I can link it down below. Yeah, but for those that are just starting the IB or are thinking of doing visual arts in the IB, the process portfolio is basically a task that you are required to present documentation of your experimentation, manipulation, exploration and refinement of a variety of visual arts activities during the development of your body of work over the 2-year course. So it's important that you do the work, or that you did the work between year 11 and year 12. Basically, the process portfolio is more or less a summary of all your portfolios and notebooks, sketchbooks, as well as some other artworks like work on canvas or 3D works that are basically summarized as a series of screen-based slides. They should be annotated. I did visual arts standard level, and standard level students generally have to submit between 9 and 18 screens. And the work must be in at least 2 art-making forms, each from separate columns of the art-making forms table, which I can also link down below. So when I started doing the IB, so 2017, it was a regulation that you cannot include any resolved works for part 3, which is the exhibition. However, when I graduated in 2018, it was actually allowed. So for our year, it was actually allowed. So I think I included 1. However, I would check with your teacher how the current marking criteria looks like, and really just work based on that, because that's what they are going to grade. So without further ado, I would say that we just start. So this is my first page. I didn't have a cover page. I handed in 18 pages in total, and I would just walk you through a little. I did my slides on PowerPoint, and I tried for it not to look too clustered, but I just had so much text and so many photos that I wanted to include, so that was like my compromise. I tried to minimize the font here. On the right side I included some more spacing. Basically, this first page is already very representative for criteria A, skills, techniques and processes, because as you know, it's a process portfolio. Because for criteria A, what the examiner is looking for is work that demonstrates assured and sustained experimentation and manipulation of a range of skills, techniques and processes, and a highly appropriate selection of materials consistent with intentions. So basically, evidence, how you can show that, is drawings, sketches, or for example, photographs or computer screenshots or edited work. So let's start in the top left corner. I did a photo study. Above the photo studies, so in the right corner of this field, I just annotated that it is my own work. Just that the examiner is not confused. It's a photo study, so the medium I used, and it's lens media, so I experimented a little with the light and shadows with my wooden doll. And I just explained how I did it, and the importance of light, and some knowledge I already had from researching some artists and some art movements. So I included, for example, the chiaroscuro, which was very prominent in the Renaissance. So based on those photographs, I also did some other studies. For example, I did a watercolor painting, which is definitely not one of my best. It's actually in A3, I should have written it there. So I just used watercolor, and I kind of wanted to show how I can process my photos, because the photos alone are not enough. You have to show that you can actually work with them and from them. And I mostly used those photos as a base. So I did this watercolor painting, talked a little about it. Because the colors were really faded and too watery, I said that I would try a different medium. and which is good, which shows reflection and reviewing, and which is criterion D, where you should show how you can review and refine ideas. And you should also reflect upon the acquisition of skills and analysis of your development as an artist. So basically reworking imagery, employing different techniques or media. That's exactly what I did. And evaluations and reflections made throughout. Although it's criterion D, you should show it throughout the whole portfolio. Yeah, so the screens that you actually select in the end should evidence a sustained inquiry into the techniques that you have used for making art in a way in which you have experimented, explored, manipulated and refined materials, technologies and techniques, and how you have applied these to your development work. Really have to talk about your own decisions. So this is just an oil pastel drawing. It's also A3, which you can see worked way better as the photographs were really dark. Then on the right side, you just see my photo study. I hope that this video doesn't get banned, but basically I took photos of myself and I edited them. Here I just talked about their composition. So let's get to the second page. Here I showed how I edited them, which was really important for me because if you edit them, so if you process them, that's also, again, check mark into the marking criteria. I did a digital illustration of how I set everything up, my light setup, the program I used, and then I went through step by step how I edited the photo. So what I did, for example, down here, I increased the contrast and I had some other changes done to it. So I'm decreasing the highlights, taking some of the shadows out, and of course you have to use the subject-specific language. So I would also recommend to you, because that's basically what I did. When I did my portfolio, basically when I wrote about it, I had a sheet of vocabulary next to me. It was multiple pages long, but I had all the vocabs that they want to hear and that are appropriate to the subject, because when you talk about the things that you did, you should remember who your audience is, and your audience is probably a teacher that has studied that, so use a jargon, use a common language. That's what I did. That's for IB Visual Arts. I hadn't heard of most of the art movements or anything. Unless you knew the vocabs before, a vocabulary sheet is a very good help. So then I showed a before and after, and I labeled it a photo montage. So next page, we are still not done with the photos that I took. Yeah, as I really like the oil pastel drawing. And then I picked one of the photos and I decided to go for the one where I sat, so the final edited one. I used that as the basis for my next work, which was actually part of my final work. And I also labeled the numbers so that the examiner wouldn't get confused. Because as you can see, because getting so much text and so many photos in photos that are still legible was very hard, but it's criterion number E, presentation and subject with specific language that I just talked about. Therefore, it should be visually appropriate, legible and engaging. So the writing has to be legible, the layout has to be considered, the visuals and the text should be balanced. That's what I kind of aimed for. So I just labeled them through from 1 and showed some swatches, then 2, 3, all of the processes, and this was basically how I did my oil pastel drawing. So coming on to my next work, they don't have to be in order, the screens, however I decided to put them in chronologically. So this was the basis for my first final work, and this was the extension of my first final work, and that's why I decided to put them in that order. And I again did a photo study and I tried to annotate it. So I wrote, for example, shadow on face, covering the face print, and the medium again is digital photography. I was inspired by Frida Kahlo's works and by the Mexican Day of the Death, so El Día del Muerto. And that photo that I went for is actually me, and I just using some Cushing's paint. I painted it on my face and then took photos of it. I again tried to link it to the art movement and what the influences were. Then I did another photo study where I arranged some skulls together with flowers, and it's again digital photography because I took a photo of it. Here you can see a different assembly. Then I painted part of it using acrylic paint, which was a lot of fun. And I just described the process and my intentions again, and I tried to be hyper-realistic, or rather on the realistic side. This was actually A2, size A2. I created a pencil drawing of the skull, and I was fortunate that my pencils were water-based, so I made a watercolor painter of it instead, which you can see here. And down here, from this setup, I actually used fine liner, and here I accidentally swatched all around it for to test the colors. And so I decided to go for a black background, which is also good because you can review again. And I just annotated everything. And up here I went to a museum and I just sat in front of the windows and I just made some quick pencil drawings, some sketches. Art terminology, you would call that an observational study, just showing that I can actually use the materials. So next page, which was the next step for my final work. My final works were quite complex. If I do an exhibition tour, you will probably see them there. Here I just used Photoshop again just to play around with both of my works. Because you have to remember that your works have to have a meaning, they have to have a purpose, and you have to want to express something through it. So using the pictures from the photo series, I wanted to overlay the picture. The picture of myself, I said, would represent the vulnerable nature of the human body. I wanted to overlay it with delicate flowers. Links to criterion C, communication of ideas and intentions in both visual and written forms. So I did the photo study first because otherwise I didn't know how to express what I actually wanted to say. You should really have an idea in mind, and that's what I did. And I just used this media to express what I intended. I tried to do that using imagery and annotation, and therefore considering how meaning might be conveyed through the work, using symbolism and imagery. So I think I will go faster now. And then I used a different medium because I really liked flowers. I didn't just want to leave it at the digital homage. I tried hand embroidering, and yeah, you can see the process here. I labeled it again, talked about my struggles and basically everything I did. And my last step was actually placing the embroidery on the oil pastel. And in the top right corner, I also mentioned Anna Teresa Barbosa, which I used as my inspiration. Again, linking to criterion B, critical investigation. Next page, again, digital photography, annotated, and based on that, I picked a few that I liked, that I wanted to process further. Here, just to give you an idea on different media you can use, I used nail polish actually to paint this moldy tomato. Then I used the felt tip maker for this other drawing. I used watercolor as well and curved lines because I just wanted to test it out. You have to remember it should be fun, and really during the process it was fun. But it was hard, it was a lot of work, but it was so much fun. I really enjoyed it. And here again, played around with darkroom again. And this was the basis for my next final work. So from then on, I proceeded. I did a big acrylic painting, which is actually, I think, 1 on 2 meters. And I used pigments, so I just tried to show media awareness and different techniques, used charcoal. So, and as I enjoyed embroidering so much, I used Erin Endicott's works as the basis for the next step for my final work. I again tried it on an app on the iPad, just to try it out and to see whether what I had in mind would actually work. So I did a digital photo montage again. I was also too scared. I did a sketch, and based on that, I made the outline for the embroidery. So next step was picking a color, talked about my color choices, practiced on a different fabric just to get a feel of it and to know like how thick did I want to make the stitches and stuff. And I used my template that I created in advance. Yeah, I again numbered everything and just showed how everything went together. So this is actually the embroidery on the acrylic painting, what I had imagined before actually realized. Coming up to my next final work, I again based it on a digital photography, did some sketches, had some artist inspiration. Here I showed how to use printmaking and how printmaking works. So I kind of tried to explain the steps that were involved in printmaking. So I talked about the press and about the scratcher. I tried it out on a different painting because again I wasn't brave enough to put it on my real painting initially. I just showed the media and talked a little about my choices. Next step, artist. Because my teacher told me that just talking a little bit about, for example, Max Powell was not enough. So I included a detailed study of an artist, so I looked at his life and of course really important referencing. In the IB you should use MLA format, so I try to do that. In art it's a little different. Just talk to your teacher, they will be happy to help you. And I looked at his life and things that shaped his art. Based on this painting from Lucien Freud, I did my own oil painting, which you can see really big here. I tried to keep the work of the artist really small and put mine really in focus. And along this painting I did a critical investigation with the original and talked about mine choices. Of course this is not the best oil painting, however I tried to imitate the style and that's what counts. So, next page. As I really liked the style, I thought that it would work really good with the photos that I took of my grandmother as well. I did a pencil sketch first. Based on that, I did an acrylic painting actually, because I thought it was a little too watery. I used oil colors instead and just showed the different processes. For example, here you can see that I added the reds going from 9 to 10, and then I went on, because this investigation of, for example, Lucien Freud has really impacted my work. So I was now aware that I could also use another medium that was more suitable, more appropriate. This is a shot of my final work. So you can see this is oil painting of my lovely grandmother. My final piece was not finished yet. So I just showed my next steps, everything I did. It was kind of chronologically going from one all over. However, I did some branches going out because I did some little steps in between. I did some testings on different rounds before I actually went on my final. You just see that there. Okay, coming to my next final work, I just showed the process again. See a pattern, digital photography, doing some trials, and finally the whole process, how everything came together. And overall, I had so many photos that I included. I had so many that I also just couldn't include. I had to pick the ones that are really representative, and I would recommend you just take the photos. Afterwards, I thought, yeah, I will remember that I added the shades here and that I did the highlights here, but it's good to have the whole process in photos and document it, because then you can go from photo to photo and you really see a change, and then you can also talk about it. And that's really what I did. I did it step by step. This is the next page. I know this looks really crowded, but I tried to lay it out. Mindmap. This is the basis of my final work. And from that, again, some branches, every aspect of the work and what process went into it. And as I said, my finals were quite complex. And here you can see, for example, again, an oil pastel drawing. Oil pastel is probably my favorite medium. So this is my great-grandmother, and this is just a tennis player. And here, again, testing with different media, how it would look good before actually using it on my final. So this is the last page, and it was really interesting. All of my works were centered around the theme of transience of life, and about how time passes, and if you want to know more about my intentions and the purpose, I talk about that more in the exhibition video. That's why I thought that wilting leaves would be very suitable. Again, trying different media, combining it with more photos that I took of my grandmother, writing on photography again. And down here just showing how I use different media. This was actually really interesting. I found that when I was on Pinterest, another tip for me is go on Pinterest and actually look for inspiration. That's what I did. And I saw some works that were eco-printing, which I found so interesting because I already did the photo study of the wilting leaves and I thought it would fit together perfectly. And so I just tried it out. It didn't work all the time, however I included the best works for mine. I did not use them for any of my finals. Just good to show an awareness of the different media that exist, and again it was a lot of fun and raised my awareness. This was my process portfolio. I created it in the vocabulary next to me, the photos that I took, a certain folder on my phone, having the extended marking criteria printed out. This is what my process portfolio is based on. Work closely with the marking criteria, through the requirements for the highest level of achievement, and then see if your work qualifies, if that is what you're aiming for. Just wanted to show you my process portfolio. That's what I did. I put a lot of work into it. However, I think when you put a lot of work into it, really truly want to create something and express something through your art, definitely achievable. Everyone can achieve it. You don't have to use perfect English as long as your ideas come across. So don't be put off, and I wish you all the best. If you're interested, I will also do an exhibition tour, and perhaps I could also talk about the comparative study. Thank you for watching. Don't give up, just believe in yourself and work.